For 16 years, one killer turned the city into a stage. No pattern, no motive, just bodies and fear. But when the killer promises one final act, the truth begins to unravel, revealing a monster hiding in plain sight. The city of Belmont had learned to live with fear. Each year, on the second Friday of October, a chilling silence will descend. Shops shuttered early, streets emptied by nightfall, and parents tucked their children in with nervous smiles that barely masked the dread. For 16 years, the Carver haunted them, a ghost who carved every death with surgical precision. His victims were always alone, always killed swiftly, and always marked with a jagged symbol carved into their chests, a spiral intersected by a single vertical slash. No two victims shared race, gender, age, or class. The only thing that connected them was a shared fate, chosen by a killer who never left a fingerprint or clue behind. The media fed on the story like wolves. Documentaries speculated his motives. Podcasts dissected his signature. Internet sleuths turned his killings into myth, branding him the devil with a scalpel. But those within the police department didn't indulge in speculation. They buried their failures beneath manila folders and sleepless nights. At the heart of that failure was Detective Simon Graves, a once celebrated homicide detective, now grayed and worn thin by the weight of ghosts he couldn't exorcise. Simon sat in the corner of the precinct's incident room, staring at the corkboard that hadn't changed in years. 16 faces stared back at him, young, old, rich, poor, smiling in the way only the dead do. He rubbed his eyes, already exhausted, though it was barely past noon. His colleagues shuffled past him with a careful deference, knowing better than to interrupt his rituals of silence. Then came the message. It arrived without warning, without sender. A crisp, white envelope delivered to every media outlet, every major news site. Its contents were simple. A single line written in bold, meticulous ink. The final act. 1 year, 1 night, one masterpiece of death. Yours truly, the Carver. The city erupted in panic. Commentators speculated a mass killing. Talk radio burned with fear. City Hall demanded answers. But Simon said nothing. Instead, he reached for the one thing he swore he'd never do again: call in outside help. Detective Noah Hart arrived 3 days later. In his mid-30s, clean-cut, but unassuming, Noah spoke with a calmness that unnerved most people. He didn't dress like someone who wanted attention, but there was a sharpness in his gaze, as if every room he walked into became a crime scene waiting to be solved. He didn't ask for introductions. He didn't care about the politics. He asked for one thing: access to the files. All of them. For the next 48 hours, Noah barely left the department archive room. He pinned victim photos to the walls, cross-referenced locations, studied times of death, scoured old security footage and coroner's reports. He scribbled notes that no one else understood, drew lines that intersected in maddening shapes. Simon checked in only once, half expecting the outsider to be rattled. Instead, Noah simply turned from the board and said, "There's no connection." Simon frowned. "You sure?" "Yes," Noah said quietly. "He's not choosing people. He's just hunting." Simon's stomach twisted. In that moment, he realized the horror wasn't in what the Carver wanted, but in what he didn't. Detective Noah Hart sat beneath a cone of fluorescent light that hummed like a dying insect. Around him, the precinct's cold case archive sprawled in organized chaos. Boxes marked with faded ink, dusty manila folders, brittle photographs clipped to brittle timelines. The air was dry with the scent of mildew and old secrets. Noah thrived in this kind of silence. It wasn't peace exactly, but a space where only facts existed, stripped of hysteria. He began building a timeline, one far longer than the Carver's known killings. He scoured police records from decades before the first confirmed murder, missing persons, unexplained deaths, closed cases with no suspect. He layered them against the murders like overlapping transparencies, arranging them by date, geography, forensic detail. The deeper he dug, the more the city itself seemed to shift beneath him. Not a grid of neighborhoods, but a living organism with pressure points. All the confirmed kills had occurred on the same date, but more chilling was that the locations formed a rough spiral, expanding outward, through the industrial veins of Belmont. The Carver wasn't just repeating a date, he was moving, methodically, spatially, almost ritualistically. Then, the present broke the silence of the past. 3 people vanished in 2 weeks, all ordinary: a high school janitor walking home, a young woman closing her cafe, a retired mailman on his usual morning walk. No political ties, no symbolism, no media frenzy, but their disappearances echoed something primal. No forced entry, no camera footage, no sounds. Each disappearance occurred within a few blocks of long abandoned factories or defunct rail stations, areas Noah had already marked on his expanding map of the killer's movements. The pattern was clear. The Carver wasn't waiting for his final act, he was preparing for it. Noah grew more withdrawn, more intense. The murder board in his temporary office looked deranged, colored string forming webs that seemed impossible to decipher. Coffee cups multiplied. He muttered to himself as he drew new connections. Access tunnels beneath the city, blueprints of old industrial sites, fire inspections ignored for years. He rarely slept, and when he did, he dreamt of spirals of corridors narrowing into blades. Then, something changed. He logged into his private case files late one night and saw something odd. A file he hadn't opened yet, labeled V-12-flatline. It had been accessed twice. Once at 1:34 a.m. by him, the second 2 hours later. Noah frowned. There was no record of any user attached to the second login. It was a ghost entry. He brought it to internal affairs the next morning. They brushed it off, called it a glitch in the system or a duplicate session. He pressed harder. They promised to look into it, but when he returned to his desk, the login trace was gone, scrubbed, clean, like it never had existed. That night, as he sat in his dark apartment, staring out at the city's flickering skyline, Noah realized something cold and certain. He wasn't just hunting the Carver anymore. Someone was watching him hunt. The steel factory loomed like a corpse beneath the moonlight, long, dead, but still radiating menace. Its rusted exterior sagged inward, swallowed by decades of decay, its windows gaping like broken teeth. Noah stood before it, gloved hand tightening around his flashlight, the other on the grip of his sidearm. The silence was thick, unnatural. Even the rats and pigeons knew better than to call this place home. He hadn't told anyone he was coming. There was no backup, no authorization, just a gnawing certainty born from instinct and sleepless obsession. The disappearances, the janitor, the woman, the mailman, all traced back to the vicinity of this forgotten industrial grave, which was one of the dozen other industrial warehouses Noah had tirelessly visited through the night. His fingers hovered over the flashlight switch, then clicked it on. A pale beam split the dark. Inside, the air was heavy with rot. The floor groaned beneath his boots, webs clung like veils to warped beams. While the walls sweated rust, he moved cautiously, sweeping the light over each corridor, the deeper sections narrowing like the throat of a beast. His breath fogged in the cold, chemical staleness. The place had been abandoned by industry, but not by purpose. Noah turned the corner and froze. Ahead, steel cages lined the walls like zoo enclosures. Most were empty, blood-stained, claw-marked. Others were not. Gaunt figures slumped inside, motionless, eyes hollow, limbs bound in silence. He moved slowly past them, bile rising in his throat. Surgical tools lay meticulously arranged on nearby tables. Scalpels, clamps, bone saws, all gleaming under a faint overhead bulb. A mounted recorder blinked red, as if still capturing every muffled scream. Wires led into the walls like veins, feeding the grotesque performance space that spanned the entire room. It was a shrine, a theater, a place not just of murder, but of design. Then, a sound shattered the silence, a slow clap. Noah spun, gun raised. From the shadows stepped Detective Simon Graves, the man Noah had trusted, the one who called him in, now illuminated in the cone of his flashlight. His eyes caught the light like glass. In his hand, a service pistol rested with casual menace. "I was hoping it'd be you," Simon said, voice calm, almost warm. "Of all the idiots chasing ghosts, you saw through the fog." Noah's mind raced. "Why?" he said, voice low. "Why'd you go this far?" Simon stepped closer, grin curling like smoke. You want motive? He whispered. There is none, not the kind your files explain. The first one, she begged. No, I thought I'd feel horror, remorse, but instead, I felt awake for the first time in years. His tone grew reverent. It was intimate, pure. I didn't want it to end. Noah recoiled. You were the lead on your own case. That's the brilliance of it, Graves said with a laugh. I chose the victims, manipulated the evidence. I was the investigation. Every year, I danced them in circles, and they gave me medals. His expression twitched into madness. This isn't just killing. It's craft, precision, legacy. Noah's fingers edged toward his radio, buying time. You think this is art? Simon tilted his head. And yet, here you are, he murmured. Gun drawn, heart pounding, watching. Just another audience member. And then, from somewhere behind the cages, a soft step echoed. Graves had help. Noah woke to his wrist tied against a rusted chair, the ropes cutting deep as he strained against them. Graves had confiscated his weapon and flashlight with the help of a young girl for who, as long as she can remember, has been held captive in fear, and knows nothing else but to obey him, in fear of what he might do. Graves paced slowly, methodically, the gun dangling from his fingers with relaxed menace. I studied serial killers for years, Graves said, voice calm, reflective, like a professor delivering a lecture. They lurk in corners, make manifestos, codes, patterns. I rejected all of it. Why hide behind rules when you could thrive in freedom? No message, no politics, just clarity. Noah, though still bound, didn't flinch. His breathing slowed, his voice stayed measured. So tell me, he said, about you first, the one that turned you into this. Graves stopped pacing. He tilted his head like a dog, considering whether to bite. Then, he smiled. She was nobody, he said. A drunk driver, killed a kid, and walked because of a technicality. I watched the system fail. I followed her for weeks, learned her routines, broke into her house on a Tuesday, while she still nursed wine and self-pity. She screamed. They all screamed the first time. But then, she cried, and it sounded like music. When I carved her open slow and careful, I watched the guilt spill out with the blood. His voice dropped to a whisper, and in that moment, I realized I was born for this. You're not born for anything, Noah spat, his heart pounding. You're not an artist. You're a coward who just got lucky hiding behind a badge. Graves' jaw twitched. The amusement faded from his eyes. Careful now. You're not special. You didn't create a masterpiece. You butchered strangers. That's it. You're a footnote. You'll be forgotten in 5 years' time. Graves stepped closer, breath warm and rancid. I made this city kneel. I gave them fear, purpose. I carved flesh and gave press interviews hours later. I shook hands with politicians with blood under my fingernails. I didn't just fool them. I performed for them, and they loved it. You're a joke, Noah whispered. Delusional monster clinging to a fantasy. That did it. With a snarl, Graves raised his gun, but Noah had baited him perfectly. The moment the muzzle rose, Noah kicked forward with all his strength, toppling the chair and throwing himself onto Graves. He hit the ground hard, breaking the restraints, shoulder cracking. But adrenaline, it numbed the pain. The gun clattered across the floor. Both men dove for it, hands scrabbling on concrete. They collided into a torture table, metal clanging and scalpel spilled like silver teeth. Graves grabbed Noah by the throat, but Noah drove his elbow into his jaw, dazing him. Blood splattered. The two brawled viciously, slipping in grime and darkness. Graves lunged again, screaming, but Noah ducked and slammed him into the control panel. Sparks burst as a fuse blew, bathing the room in a crimson emergency light. By the time backup arrived, Graves was zip-tied, gasping, his face bloody, but grinning. They'll never understand. He hissed as officers dragged him away. I gave them fear, ritual, meaning, and every year, they looked forward to me. Noah didn't reply, he just turned his back and walked out of the warehouse, the screams of the survivors behind him being the only thing louder than the echo of Graves' final performance. The sun rose over Belmont with an unfamiliar gentleness. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, October's second Friday came and went, without death. No eerie press releases, no emergency sirens, no names whispered in mourning. Instead, the morning news played a different tune, one that reverberated through every cafe, subway, and cracked sidewalk of the city. The Carvers caught. Detective Graves arrested. The footage from Noah's body cam was leaked within hours of the arrest. It showed everything, the cages, the blood, the confrontation, and Graves' chilling confession. The nation watched it in collective horror as the myth unraveled, revealing a monster wearing a badge. Commentators called it the betrayal of the century. Protesters demanded reform. Victims, families, wept on live television. But beneath the noise, something else stirred. The survivors, those found in the cages, began to speak, not all at once, not without tremors in their voices, but piece by piece. Their stories painted the true picture. The fear, the years of captivity, the way Graves would visit and talk about beauty while holding blades. Their voices, raw and fractured, broke the city's heart all over again. Noah Hart became a reluctant hero. The department held a press conference in his honor. Commendations were promised, a mayoral medal, an interview offer from 60 Minutes. But Noah politely declined most of it. The praise felt like noise, applause in a theater that had been built on top bodies. He returned to work within a week, but something in him had shifted. It was quieter now, even for him. The precincts always buzzed with gossip, but Noah moved through them like a shadow. When asked how he figured it out, how he solved the case that had outlasted 3 chiefs and a task force, he simply said, "I listened to what didn't make sense." One night, a week after the arrest, Noah stood alone on the precinct's rooftop. The city pulsed below, horns, laughter, distant sirens, all of it alive. The wind was cold, tugging at the collar of his coat. He lit a cigarette, though he didn't smoke, and let it burn between his fingers, untouched. He thought of the cages, the blood, the way Graves smiled through his confession, as though proud of what he'd built. Captain Morales joined him after a few minutes, hands deep in her jacket. "You did good, Hart," she said, voice rough from too many years on the job. "People are sleeping easier tonight because of you." Noah didn't answer right away. He watched the bus crawl through traffic like a glowing beetle, faces behind fogged windows staring at the world. They kept moving. "I don't think monsters go away," he said eventually. "I think they change their faces. There are new tricks." Morales nodded. "Maybe, but people still fight them. That has to count for something." He glanced at her and back at the city. "Yeah, it does." That night, Belmont slept without fear. Candles were lit for the victims, streets echoed with footsteps instead of silence, and for the first time in 16 years, the anniversary passed without bloodshed. The Carver's reign had ended, but the scars etched into memory, into justice, into the city itself remained. For Noah Hart, those scars will never fade.